So now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome today's panel moderator, Janelle James, Senior Vice President and Head of Cultural Intelligence with Ipsos in the US. Janelle, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ellen. We are so excited to be here today for what I'm sure will be a wonderfully insightful conversation on innovation and sustainable growth. In many ways, this conversation is a continuation of so many conversations we've had in 2025, particularly our last roundtable on strategic partnership and the one prior on sustainability, really focusing on CMO and CSO partnerships. I'm excited because we also have an incredible lineup of panelists here today that really just make up a wonderful brain trust of marketing, innovation, climate, and sustainability professionals, and of course, corporate reputation. And so without further ado, let's just get into introductions. I would love for each of our panelists to introduce themselves by telling us about their current role, a little bit about their career journey and how their role touches marketing, sustainability, innovation, and maybe share a recent project that highlights this. Let's see, who should we get started with? Bill, do you want to get us started?
Sure. Well, my current role is as the lead climate advisor to the worldwide advertising sector through a group called AdNet Zero. And when I say that, I am as surprised as the ad people are because I have focused most of my 40+ years on sustainability in heavy emitting sectors, really boring policy stuff, working with governments, working with investors. And so quite by happy accident for the last 4 years, focused on the ad sector to help them decrease their carbon emissions, as well as do the right thing and use their superpowers for good. So most of my experience has been in the global south, as well as a heavy experience in the global north, but literally working across almost any sector you can think of. Working right now on a really interesting standard for the ad sector called the Global Media Sustainability Framework, which is a greenhouse gas life cycle assessment methodology, similar to methodologies I developed before, including as part of the leadership group with the Greenhouse Gas Protocol back in 99-2000. So this gives every advertiser a transparent and equivalent way to assess their advertising emissions, which are not nothing, and in some cases, the top 3 sources of emissions for their entire company. So that's me.
I'm happy to go next.
Thank you, Nadia. Oh, go for it.
Oh, it's someone else. Hi, I'm Nadia. I'm excited to go after Bill because AdNet Zero is a personal favorite of mine and Google's own heart. So yeah, I'm from Google. I work as our global ad sustainability marketing lead. And so what that means is essentially we're trying to bridge that intersection between sustainability and advertising and thinking through how we can support our advertising partners, brands, agencies, in reducing the carbon footprint of their media, as well as improving the ability for us as marketers to really accelerate the growth and transition to a more sustainable future. So for my entire career, I've worked in tech within a marketing capacity. For the majority of that work, I've focused on supporting purpose-led and driven brands, whether that be startups or larger brands that have a sustainability or purpose-led sort of horizontal across. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to participate in this panel. And I've already heard what folks had to say in our sort of prep calls, and there's going to be a lot of great nuggets. So thank you for having me on this.
Thank you. Hugh Ann, you're up next.
Thanks, Janelle. Thanks for having me. Super excited to share the panel with so many exciting folks today. I'm Hugh Ann Hughes, Vice President of Marketing at L'Oreal, specifically working on luxury fragrances. And my career journey, I have been in the beauty space for over 15 years now. Been at L'Oreal for about 12 years in a variety of roles. So I started in beauty and business development, did digital marketing, e-commerce, media, consumer insight, and now more in the traditional marketing space. And I am so excited for this topic today. I love the fact that we are sort of playing the double entendre of sustainable growth, because my career has definitely been anchored in, building brands sustainably, and building brands that are here for the long term. And I think that also dovetails nicely into the idea of sustainability for our planet and the environment. I am currently leading marketing for Mugler fragrances here in the US. And we actually have a refillable line. The line has been refillable since 1992. So we were one of the very first, if not the first, fragrance companies to offer that. And so, actually one unique differentiator of our brand is that it is available to fill in stores at a department store, over 300 points of distribution, where you can bring in your empty bottle and refill it. And we love that, over the course of time has saved tons of glass and production. And it's also allowed consumers to keep that precious bottle of theirs and save a little as well as they refill their favorite perfume. And so love that we get to play in the brand building space and also in the planet building space.
Thank you. And we definitely love a good double entendre. So let's see if we can keep them coming. Jason, last but not least.
Great, glad to be here. Thank you for having me. I lead our reputation practice here at Ipsos. So we help companies understand what drives trust, how they can build trust, what is going to detract from it. And ultimately that's used for helping companies to build more effective narratives, better communications and stakeholder engagement strategies that really align to the priorities that different stakeholder groups have. And I think there's nothing more important to sustainable growth than trust, right? Trusted organizations perform better. And that is, leading to predictability. And it's when there's turbulence or when there are issues that trust is lost. And that has an impact for sure. But through our work, we also understand, where does sustainability fit in? Where do social issues fit in, and the engagement and expectations that different stakeholder groups have of companies in different sectors? So I think one of the more interesting things that we've worked on lately is actually a piece of thought leadership that looks at different industries and really what drives perceptions and where the expectations around ESG initiatives. Do stakeholders anticipate or expect that companies in different industries should focus on environmental issues, on social issues, or on governance issues? And it's different if you're a financial services firm versus an airline versus an oil and gas company versus CPG company or food and beverage, right? So really understanding how companies are navigating today's issues environment, which is far more complex and turbulent than we've seen in a long time, and how perceptions around ESG or sustainability overall are shifting, and how companies are responding to that is what I find to be fascinating.
We also find it to be fascinating. So really excited for this conversation. The next question might well be my favorite in all of our roundtables. It's a nickname question. So I would love for each of you to come up with your resetting for 2026 nickname that helps me and the audience understand what is your priority when you're thinking about innovation and or sustainable growth. Hugh-Ann, you want to get us started with a nickname?
Yes, I love a good nickname. And today, my focus would really be on the fundamentals. So I am going to be Fundamentals Francine for the next hour. And, for me, that really means just getting back to the consumer at the core, being consumer obsessed, taking those insights and using them to, maintain your cultural relevance and, making sure that you're engaging your consumer in a meaningful way. At the end of the day, there will be, tons of innovation. And I think that the real opportunity for brands is to not chase the shiny object, but instead focus on the fundamentals.
And I love that the consumer is at the center of that. Nadia, what's your nickname for us?
So my nickname is Galinda, the Bubble Popper, for any of the Wicked fans in the house. So yeah, amazing. When I think about sustainability, I think so much of the groundwork that we've done thus far has been really quite insular and relatively siloed. Whereas where I feel like we need to go next is, really thinking through, what are the bubbles that need to be popped, right? Like what are the sort of macro scale actions and ways of working that need to change? So as an example, right now, if the light just went off in my room, I'm in the office, it goes off ever so often if there's no motion to save energy, right? So that's like a very small thing, small change that can have, a sizable impact at scale. Within my role, within the ad sustainability working group that I sit on, we launched a carbon footprint for Google Ads, which is built off of the GMSF framework that Bill mentioned, that Net Zero sort of steered. And that's another example of thinking through, okay, originally folks have not even considered carbon footprint as it relates to, like running ads and having your marketing campaigns. And this is now something that we've galvanized the entire industry and, thought through how can we, really move the needle and drive ecosystems level change. So yeah, Glinda the Bubble Popper.
Love that. Jason, what's your nickname?
So everything that we do is all about illuminating the different insights that help to inform strategies, right? And I've had the fortune of being in a webinar with you before, Janelle, and have had a nickname, but I'm resetting for 2026 here. And I used to always talk about insights and really informing the work that we do with insights. But what we're finding now, where we're headed in 2026, is really integrating insights across the organization. So I'm resetting for 2026. I'm going to be the insights integrator.
I love that. And third time's a charm. I think this might be our third roundtable together. So really love that. And last but not least, Bill, what is your nickname?
Well, first of all, I think that sensor in Nadia's room is wrong because Nadia clearly has motion. And I'm going to be Bulldozer Bill. So I grew up in Miami, Florida, land of hurricanes where the wind changes very suddenly and strongly. So it's important to keep calm and carry on.
Bulldozer Bill, love it. No, you guys did such a wonderful job with the nicknames. Transitioning into the main part of the conversation, the session is titled Resetting for 2026, Innovation and Sustainable Growth. What 2025 characteristics that you're seeing in the marketplace broadly require a reset? Jason referenced that it's more turbulent in this context, for example. I'm curious what you're seeing. What are the signals? What signals are businesses across industries paying close attention to or may need to correct for? Jason, do you want to get us started with this one?
For sure. And I think that piece of the question right there that you mentioned, what signals our businesses paying close attention to, is really key. And I think what I'm seeing is businesses paying more attention to the social signals, right? Looking at public sentiment, understanding where society is at today, and how that breaks down by different demographics and different stakeholder groups. It's important. What we've seen lately is a shift in terms of the top concern, right? We saw post-election political polarization and a concern about political polarization increasing or threats to democracy. It's very clear in our polling work now the top concern is jobs, the economy, cost of living, right? And so companies now are thinking about, how do we prioritize our initiatives? How do we prioritize our communication so that we are aligned to these consumer concerns and demonstrating the action that we're taking? And in the context of today's discussion, right, innovation is still absolutely a key factor. We do find in our work that it is one of the key drivers of reputation for organizations. Organizations that are viewed as more innovative tend to have strong trust scores, as long as it's responsible innovation. There's a lot to unpack there. But it's not for the innovation for the sake of innovation, right? It's innovation today that's going to drive efficiency, drive quality, drive cost savings, perhaps, demonstrate value to consumers. So a lot of companies really are paying attention right now to signals on social issues and determining where, when, and how they engage on certain issues or not. And I'm sure we'll be discussing some of that today as well.
I love that, particularly because it connects with Huan's introduction and how she talked about being consumer-centric and not just chasing the flashy objects. So I'm curious, Huan, what are the signals you're paying attention to or that you're seeing broadly in the marketplace that everyone should be paying attention to?
100% could not agree more with Jason's assessment of the landscape right now. It really is all about staying in the minds and hearts of the consumer. And it's true, consumers are concerned. So we as brands also have to be concerned. But I think, you're also very correct in saying that, innovation is really going to shift more toward things that demonstrate clear value, right? I think, maybe we enjoyed a period where the bar for innovation was a little bit lower and we could afford to invest in every and anything. And I think instead we're just going to have to be a lot more choiceful, right, and directed and laser focused on what is the consumer really needing and what's going to deliver a superior experience and be worthwhile for the consumer in the long run.
Bill, as the bulldozer, what are the signals, subtle or not so subtle, that you're paying attention to or think we should all be paying attention to?
Yes, so I think there's a lot of noise out there, right? So the noise to signal ratio has increased a fair amount. So I think it's getting back to focusing on the fundamentals, including things like, hey, the climate is still getting warmer. Science and physics still hold, and consumers still sense that. And even at the political level, if you look into what people want, they want what they deserve, a good quality of life. So I think there's certain things that don't really change that much. Focus on those things. Focus on the core values that you have as a company. See how those link to the core values of your customers, and I think you will keep your head.
Makes sense. Nadia, I'm curious, anything to add to this part of the conversation as we transition?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would really just echo what everyone else has said. I think from a sustainability lens, off the back of the political polarization, there has been a large sort of silencing where brands have, sort of steered away from discussing any sort of sustainability work that's happening behind the scenes. But that's not to be confused with there being no work happening. Like, there is still a lot of momentum. And so what I would love to see is, a shift towards folks actually like figuring out how can we speak about this in a way that resonates with our users, with what they care about, but also with what our brand value proposition is. I think that's what consumers are looking for. We don't need to go back to, the days of the ESG ad, which was very much so focused on the company. And there was no clear, connection to, what does this mean for me as an individual who's thinking of buying this product and, thinking about my own personal carbon footprint and, how I can contribute to sustainability and, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's sort of where the focus needs to shift now, really focusing and going laser deep on, like what are the actions that we are doing within our own organization? What's the impact and what does that mean for our core group of constituents?
If I can add, what I love about both what Bill said and what Nadia just said is the theme coming through that is understanding our values, who we are as an organization, ensuring our actions are aligned with those values, being very clear about that. And I think that's what we're actually seeing now also. There's a lot of companies really focusing back in on who are we, how do we be authentic to who we are as an organization, as a brand, and ensuring those are the things that they're emphasizing. And I think that really, in some instances, is a heavy emphasis on sustainability, but companies are changing how they're talking about it for sure. But like Nadia just said, companies aren't stopping the work in sustainability.
Yeah, I've been pleasantly surprised with the momentum that's continued. And it's so important that you underscored this, Nadia, because I think oftentimes in the media, because the language and the conversation has become so sanitized, if you only rely on the media, you're not seeing any of the story. It's not even half the story. You're not seeing any of the story, but it is very encouraging to know and see that the work still continues. And it's important, as you guys have pointed out, the signals that are important that we all need to look at. Before we go deeper into the conversation, obviously the innovation means something different for every company, and sustainable growth also means something different for every company. How are you guys defining these terms as you think about resetting for 2026? Given this context, how are innovation and sustainable growth connected for you? I saw your face first, Huan. Do you want to get us started on this one?
Yes, absolutely. Coming from L'Oreal, innovation is our bread and butter. As a beauty industry, so much of our business is driven each year by what is that hot new product, right? And so, for us, it, by definition has to include newness, right? But it also should encapsulate creativity and advancement, right? Innovation should be about getting better each time. And so I think, in the context of this discussion, it's important that when we think about our innovation, it's also about introducing relevance at scale. So, launching something in a vacuum or, doing something that only existed in the LinkedIn post isn't really valuable to the consumer, right? And so thinking about how everything we do actually makes it in front of the consumer and impacts their lives in a meaningful way is super important. And then as I think about sustainable growth, sustainable and sustainable, it's really about laying that groundwork for increasing returns, right? And so, and that actually applies to both the environment as well as our, bottom line. And so I think if we can continue to think about that as we do our, annual and quarterly planning and keeping those two things at the center, it can be, something that we do in the long run. I love the comments from Bill and Nadia about, not moving with the trends on sustainability, and, the ebb and flow of ESG isn't something that should be, it should be something that is as, hygienic as any other part of our P&L thinking. And so, that's what I would love to see us move toward in the long run.
Nadia, I'm curious about your thoughts, not only on the definition, on the definition, particularly because your role in ad sustainability marketing is not one that many people have thought about before. And you have galvanized so much activity and movement in the industry. How are you thinking about these terms and opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, for me, they're rooted in the same principle. Sustainable growth, as with innovation, you're looking to do more with less. So when Huan mentioned, like thinking about the returns more of your sustainability investment, I think sustainability almost has a bit of a language, or again, like a siloing problem, because really sustainability is efficiency, right? When we're working with brands who want to improve the carbon footprint, they're saying, how can we continue to drive performance and grow performance, but bring that curve down for carbon, or just resource spend in general, right? How can we reduce that wastage? So I think there's that's really where there's a shift that needs to happen, and where the sustainability world and folks who are thinking about sustainability and wanting to sort of map that into your day-to-day work, innovation is the principle that's really going to get you there. Thinking through, like, at Google, we have a saying of 10x thinking. So when we're presented with a problem, we're ideating on a problem, it's not just, okay, what's the quick solve? It's how can we really drive, 10x sort of level set and level change. And I think that's where, we need to get to with sustainability. And in my role within an ad sustainability marketing lens, this is really something that has come to be in the past couple of years. So already, through the work that at Net Zero and so many other folks, Ipsos, we've worked with you guys a lot over the past year. This is from, nothing to something, right? It's off the back of us having conversations and saying, you know what, let's bring folks together. And off the back of those conversations, we're actually saying, hey, here's the need. Let's figure out how we can bridge that gap. What frameworks do we need to build? What working groups need to happen for us to, make sure that we're validating things in the right way? Which subject matter experts do we need to bring in from the sustainability side of the house, from the marketing side of the house, from supply chain, finance, whatever it might be. And I think just, innovation really will help us get to the next level within sustainability.
Jason, I'm curious about your thoughts on terminology, not only because you work in corporate reputation and do so much on perceptions, but your breadth across industries is also really fascinating. So tell me what you're seeing in terms of how these terms are defined or understood broadly.
Yeah, sustainability is far more tangible than ESG, right? The work that we've done with lead communicators and corporate affairs folks is that ESG never really explained what it meant, what was being done, the impact that it had, right? There's a sense from some, actually, that if we want to be more descriptive of what we're doing, maybe we need to actually go back to terms like CSR or responsibility, sustainability, broadly. But there is no real firm definition that everybody has agreed on. I think what we do see in the latest research, though, is most people do agree ESG never really worked. It was a reporting structure rather than an initiative structure. Innovation is an interesting one though, right? Innovation means so many different things to so many different organizations, different stakeholders, right? Whether it's innovation in approaches to stakeholder engagement, innovation in terms of product developments, innovation in terms of services. But right now, again, I come back to one of the things I mentioned at the very beginning. It's innovation in addressing some of the key needs of stakeholders, right? There's a desire from consumers, especially, and other stakeholders, that companies focus innovation efforts on solving some of the key challenges that they're facing, as opposed to here's another new product with incremental gains, right? Or creating whole new categories, right? I know one of the key innovations that is always touted is the iPhone. Nobody knew that they needed a computer in their pocket until that problem was created, right? And a solution was created with the problem, which is look at what you can have. Those are groundbreaking, society-changing innovations. But right now, we look back at the social context, the data that we have in terms of polling, and I think the focus needs to be on innovation to address key challenges that stakeholders are facing.
I love that. Already from the three of you, we have doing more with less, relevance at scale, sustainability being more tangible than ESG, and just a real focus on needs-focused innovation. Bill, from a climate perspective specifically, anything that we're missing as we think about definitions?
No, I think great ideas, and the characteristics of both innovation and sustainability is that they really should percolate the entire organization, and that innovation and sustainability need to come from everywhere and anywhere. And a lot of this also just gets back to common sense and what we call the triple bottom line. You need to have financial performance, you need to be sustainable, and you need to have innovation that meets the needs of all of your stakeholders. So again, it's getting kind of back to that values, back to basics.
Back to basics. I do love that as well. The description of our session highlights that innovation requires integrated strategy. And I love that you mentioned that these should percolate the entire organization. What's the single biggest organizational silo that you tend to see, whether in your own organizations or just more broadly as you interact with organizations or as you see the market? And I'm curious, are you seeing the silos between marketing and comms, or R&D and sustainability, or tell me what you're seeing that must be completely broken down for integrated growth and just integrated perspective. Bill, if we can start with you.
Sure. One of the silos I'm focused on right now is the Chief Sustainability Officer and the Chief Marketing Officer. There are all kinds of ways to realize synergies, not just from decarbonization of the advertising function, but also leveraging the marketing budget to help advance the goals for those organizations that have made climate commitments. So without spending additional money, leveraging that marketing budget to include aspects, and particularly in my focus on climate right now, of climate reality, climate action, so that basically any ad could be a climate ad. So this is really exciting, and it's also interesting to observe that at the C-suite lunch table, the CSO and the CMO tend to sit at the end. They're not at the center of the conversations. And by working together, especially for those organizations that have made climate commitments, this is they can actually show how they're helping, perhaps in unexpected ways, to advance the interests of the company and have more relevance to the overall conversation. And I do have a big example we can talk about later on about even how to reinvent the basic value proposition of the company.
I love the lunch table analogy. I'm curious, if the CSO and CMO are on the ends, who's in the middle?
Oh, of course, the CEO, the COO, and the CFO. So those are typically across, I would say across sectors. Those are the cool kids in the middle, and sometimes the edge of the bench gets a little sharp for the CSO and the CMO. So want to get them more at the center of the conversation.
And throw the chief communications officer in there as well. They're usually down towards that end of the table, Bill.
I'd love to also build on that. I think so the sustainability orgs and function so far has done a really great job of sort of tapping into the operational sort of lens, like how can we, what do we need to do on the supply chain with our supply chain, right, to make sure that we hit our net zero goals. So more focused on like the operations, the logistics, that side of the house. Potentially maybe, working with more of like a CEO, those sort of functions, CFO as well. But when you think about driving growth, that's the completely opposite side of the table, as Bill said, which would be where CMO, sales sits. And the pain points that both are working to address are they seem so different, right, on the surface. But when we think of where sustainability needs to head, which is we want the sustainable choice to be the most convenient choice, to be the cheapest choice, to be the most accessible choice, right? That's what we want to get to for the industry. It's not just that net zero goal setting. It's bigger. It's a complete, shift in the ways that we do business. And I think that's where for sustainability to really be become a growth driver, the CMO and the CSO and the marketing org and the sustainability org need to be working in partnership. And so we've done a little bit of work to move that along within our organization. We've worked with Project Drawdown, where they provide guidance to teams as to how they can embed sustainability into their ways of working and thinking. So they delivered some training with our marketing team on how to infuse sustainability into the brief. And so off the back of that, we've seen more marketing campaigns that aren't even tagged as sustainability, like they're not coming from our sustainability org. They're being proactively creative and pitched by marketing teams. And that's sort of like where we want to get to, right? So yeah, I would say, really thinking through sustainability as, being more of a growth driver. And so in order to do that, more conversations need to be had with folks sitting in marketing, sitting in sales to understand, well, what is it, the pain points, what are we trying to solve for? What innovation do we need to bring? Because there might actually be a sustainability co-benefit there that we can really accelerate and tap into more.
I love the natural integration of all these and how sustainability can be fuel for growth. Tuan, I'm curious about your perspective on silos, particularly because you've had this interesting career journey where you've had the chance to sit at so many different seats in the integrated marketing table. And so curious, when you think about silos, where's your first place to look?
I love this question. Could not love it more, Janelle, honestly. And, Bill said some pretty provocative things earlier, so I'm glad I get a chance to weigh in on this one. 100%. I think that, it's true that currently the M in the CMO is not necessarily in vogue. I think that a lot of folks are thinking about, CGOs, COOs, CFOs more as being in the driver's seat than the marketing per se. And I don't know that has to be the case, right? I think it all goes back to, where I started the conversation earlier about sustainable growth and thinking about your returns holistically. And, that of course includes the investments that you make in marketing and the bets that you place in marketing. But the other thing I would emphasize is that, your first, marketing target audience sits across the table from you at that executive lead team, right? And so, making sure that the CFO, the CEO, COO also see the value in that sustainability message and those sustainability investments is really the first mission, right? Because if your own team is not bought in, then certainly consumers and other partners can't be bought in with you as well. And so really that, I think, is where the journey starts, especially if you want to have long-term growth. And then the last thing I'll say on this point, just I could go all day, is that it really does need to be baked into incentives for performance. And I think the best companies, the ones that are actually in it, for the long haul and not just for the trend or for the, press release, are actually thinking about how this impacts, the triple bottom line year in, year out, so much so that every employee is also incentivized to participate in how we get this done. because otherwise you don't get that strategic integration. We all need to be motivated.
I love that. One of the things I'm also curious about, everyone is talking so much about AI today and how it will or has changed business. Yet it's still true that 60 to 95% of tech and AI projects fail, usually due to a myriad of organizational issues, not necessarily the strength of the technology. So when you think about marketing, innovation, sustainable growth, the efficiencies that we're talking about, what, if any, role does AI play? Is it more part of the problem or part of the solution? Would love for Nadia, how are you thinking about that one?
I can start here, given that Google is a big player in the AI space. I think, so at an organizational, you mentioned these organizational issues. I think there's been so much excitement around AI. And I think there's a way of leveraging it that not everyone may be doing in the right way. So what I would say is, AI is really intended to be a multiplier and an enabler for your team. When you start thinking of it as a replacement, I think that's where we're running into issues. And we're all in the business of helping people, right? For marketing, we're looking at how we can help consumers, HR, talent, product, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think the same needs to apply with AI, thinking through like what impact can it have on the people that we're looking to serve. And so when you're, as a leader, when you're saying, okay, we want our teams to be invested in AI and know how to leverage this in their day-to-day, well, those teams also need to be educated on how to use those tools. So with Google, we 100% are supportive of this. And what our leadership does is they make sure that no matter where you sit in the business, you're getting access to trainings. I've read reports over the year of some companies saying that if an employee isn't using AI, then they need to consider their place in that company. But at the same time, you need to make sure that you're supporting the skills and development, right, and that growth of those employees. So that I say, to answer the first part of the organizational sort of issues. Yes, we have this goal that AI is going to unlock growth, but you also need to have a clear roadmap as to how you're going to bring teams and the people within your organization along that journey. So I think that's the first part of the house. On the second part of the question, from a sustainability standpoint, what I would say is, there's so much to lose at this point if by not investing in AI. So right now, I think there's a lot of sort of scare and worry around the energy footprint of AI. Some folks might see that as a bad thing. I personally see that as a good thing. When the internet was first founded, no one said, "Oh, but what about the energy footprint?" That wasn't in our vocabulary. So it just shows how far we've come. There's been some really great research that's been conducted by many different players within, public, private sector across the year. The ones that I'll call out. So the International Energy Agency, they actually have measured or estimated the carbon footprint associated with AI utilization of energy for powering data centers. And so currently AI is taking up 1.5% of the global energy demand. By either 2030 or 2035, that number would double. So it would account for about approximately 3% of global energy demand. This is lower than the energy demand of electric vehicles, air conditioning, things that we need essentially for our way of life. So for me, AI can be seen as, in a similar lens. The difference with AI is that, again, my earlier mention of that opportunity cost. By us applying AI to sustainability, that's where we can really, really move the needle on innovation and, sort of solving for, I'll keep talking in the dark, but solving for the sort of sustainability challenges that we're facing right now. I believe BCG put out a really great piece of research on this. And we've also seen within our own company, just, I believe, 5 of our products thus far that we've built leveraging AI have been let me find the stat. Sorry, I'm rattling off so many. But I believe it's around 200 million metric tons of carbon savings that we've been able to generate off the back of folks using 5 of our products that rely on AI. So that is like a small sample size example of, like the benefits that AI can bring for sustainability and like responding to climate change. And then the last nugget of research that I'll leave you with is not Google specific. This is from a survey that BCG conducted. And what they found is that companies that are using AI to help reduce emissions are 4.5 times more likely to experience significant decarbonization benefits. And reading more deeply into those details, one large component of this is actually that they're leveraging AI for their carbon accounting to actually measure the footprint down to the individual product. Imagine doing that for a company like L'Oreal, which has such a massive product portfolio, right? But it's really that data, that granularity of data that will allow you to make those decisions that, again, are having an outsized impact on your efficiency and your carbon savings. So yeah, those are my little nuggets of data and research that have come out so far that for me, I think is really exciting in terms of where we can go next with AI.
Love those nuggets. Bill, any thoughts on AI as part of the problem or solution when we think about the opportunity?
Yes, part of both. And I'm actually a senior fellow at a think tank and a lifetime member, another leading think tank. This, of course, has been front and center. So the impacts are going to be massive, similar to electricity or compute or the internet. So absolutely massive, very consequential. And there are going to be a lot of pluses and minuses. Nadia did a great job of putting out the case for a lot of the pluses. Some of the minuses are actually in, I think, the current gold rush mentality of running to build things as quickly as possible. Mistakes will be made. Things that we will, with the help of AI, redo later on. And there's going to be no displacement of people's work and jobs. Financially, I think there are going to be great benefits for that. Reducing costs, creating new opportunities, but significant changes. So we need to buckle up, lean in, understand how we can use AI in ways that do benefit us, and a lot of the plans around climate and energy in particular, they've had to be kind of put out into the future a little bit, just because there is the gold rush, and we need to have all electrons working, which also, in the U.S. context, and again, I think a key takeaway from this conversation today is the U.S. is not the world, by the way. But in the U.S., we are unplugging certain sources of electrons. We need all electrons, and especially electrons that don't damage the environment.
When people talk about, what are the hot topics in marketing and innovation, AI is one of them. The other one is Gen Z. I know there's no lack of conversation about the importance of Gen Z as future consumers, and just how they're upending everything, given how different they are, not only from a generational perspective, but one of the things we see is that all of the audiences that are underrepresented overall in the US are overrepresented in Gen Z. So we get a real understanding of what makes them unique in terms of their thinking. When all brands are thinking about marketing, innovation, and sustainable growth, they're noticing that they're different from prior generations, given their attitudes, expectations, preferences, and behaviors. And they're also the first minority-majority US generation. And so I'm curious, how do you see their role as businesses think about innovation and sustainable growth? How are they a catalyst? How are they a disruptor? Huan, you want to get us started with this one?
Yes, absolutely do. 100% agree with you on this unique generation that is Gen Z. I was reading an article the other day talking about how they're going to lead us into this, new world, right? Their level of AI adoption is, more than 3 times that of the average population. And it's a great thing. I think that as they use it, it becomes more readily accepted and more widely understood, by their older peer groups. And so I think this is a really important dynamic as it pertains to sustainability as well. Someone mentioned that AI should be a force multiplier, and that is exactly the case. And so as they become more efficient, it hopefully also frees up resources and bandwidth to make more progress in areas like sustainability. It shouldn't become an area of brain drain. Instead, it should become an area of brain unlock, right? Like it should really become a superpower enabler that helps us to answer some of the most difficult questions that we faced in the past. I think to the point about the generation being more diverse, I do think it becomes an equalizer as well. Access to information is a very real asset. And so what AI does in being able to summarize these things, it gives a massive increase in access to information. And so I think that alone is a net positive. And because Gen Z is so early in adopting this new tool, I think they will, lead the charge and eventually bring all society along with them. Similarly to how they were the first adopters on TikTok, and now we see, millennials and boomers have found their way. I think we'll see a similar dynamic on AI. So, follow the TikTok trajectory if you want to know where AI is going to go.
And Nadia, what are your thoughts on Gen Z?
Yeah, so I think from a sustainability standpoint, Juan's already done a great job of summing up the innovation AI side of things. I think from a sustainability standpoint, Gen Z is almost our barometer for authenticity, right? When we think about, them being the most diverse and having representation from, essentially all of the minority groups, Gen Z, they have the highest level of empathy because their identity is, so vast and expansive. They also are the first generation that will really feel the largest brunt of climate change within their lifetime. I think, millennials, we're impacted, but it only really became a topic later on in our lives. Whereas for them, climate change, use of the internet, all of these things, this is all things that they're native to, that they were just born into. And so it's like they live and breathe this, right? So from a sustainability standpoint, when we think about this shift that needs to happen from, saying, hey, we've set this, net zero 2030 goal, to actually, we have this amazing product, this perfume that's refillable, right? And made of glass, which is also more sustainable. Yes, and they're saying, oh, great, then I'm going to buy that. And actually what we're seeing right now with our AI-powered search is consumers, not necessarily Gen Z, but users are asking those deep, complex questions. I actually use it myself when I'm doing my Christmas shopping. I'm asking, okay, which brand should I be prioritizing if I want to buy, my mom a nice handbag? Which one has the, best materials that are durable? Which one has very clear sustainability commitments that they're upholding? These are the sorts of questions that people are asking. It's not just me. And so people are going really deep. As Yuan said, the access to information that we have right now is just incredible. You really cannot fool anyone. So as a marketer, we're not just being, asked to think twice about our messaging because, there's a policy, down the pipe. Let's say with green claims in the EU, we have loads of different policies that are being launched right now to help protect consumers from misinformation. Consumers can also check themselves to see whether a brand is, trying to, fudge the numbers or, say something that may not be 100% true. And they're not afraid to then take that to TikTok or YouTube or whatever sort of channel that they're using. So we need to have a strong litmus test, and I would say Gen Z is really that barometer for making sure that our messaging is up to par on sustainability and anything that a brand is doing right now. You really cannot do or say anything without Gen Z being able to fact check that.
We see a lot of that in terms of those higher expectations, right? In that data that I was sharing about ESG priorities and how it varies across industry. But I'd say the other thing that's important is to remember Gen Z are not just consumers, right? Evaluating companies' initiatives, brands' initiatives when it comes to product, but as employees as well. That coming back to what the expectations are as different stakeholders, they're expecting still engagement on some of these key issues that we're talking about. So, and they're more vocal about it for sure.
Absolutely. One of the things I love about Gen Z, like my son, he does not want to own a car. He does not want to drive. He wants to use AI-enabled self-driving cars. Think of transportation as a service. So Gen Z is focused on experiences, not stuff, which is the big idea I alluded to earlier, where sustainability can be a source of innovation to lots of companies in a circular economy kind of way, where the consumers really want the service of the stuff. They don't necessarily want to have the stuff. And some of the best examples of circularity that have made a ton of money are cloud computing, like at Google, and even thinking about any other types of goods that can be made into a service, even to apparel. So this is the brave new world where sustainability can be a source of innovation that rethinks the value proposition of companies, that actually takes a ton of costs out of the system. So this is actually perfect in the era of tariffs and trying to make supply chains shorter and more resilient. So oddly, this is actually a good moment for circularity and create system level benefits.
Absolutely love that. I mean, just to underscore what I think we pulled out regarding Gen Z, using them as barometers, not forgetting that they're employees, their incredible focus on experiences and circularity. And if I can add one, I was part of another conversation that was focused on Gen Z and how they're upending everything. And one of the amazing nuggets that came out of that one is that they are the media. In terms of doing all of this, they are also a form of media to continue to spread the word about all of these things that are important to us. I want to shift gears. We have time for about 2 or 3 more questions. Jason, I want to throw one specifically to you since you talked about trust earlier on. In the description of the session, we talked about waning trust, intense scrutiny, and uncertainty writ large because of the current context. Given this, what unique partnerships are you seeing emerging in the landscape, either internally in organizations or externally across industries for support, innovation, or growth?
We're seeing a lot. So internally, we see communications, corporate affairs having more of a seat at the table, right? Because as companies are trying to navigate the issues environment today and trying to either protect reputation or grow reputation, it means that where reputation has typically been managed in corporate communications and corporate affairs has more of a seat at the table across organizations. Because ultimately, everybody's responsible for the reputation of the organization, right? One misplaced comment, one post can shift things very significantly. In terms of the partnership front, I'd say companies are looking externally to build authentic partnerships with organizations that are aligned with their values, right? Companies that maybe want to still focus on environmental impact, sustainability, things like that, are not just looking at what they can do internally, but looking at where they can have a greater impact through partnerships and where they can build credibility through partnerships as well. And that's not just in the sustainability front, it's across a number of different areas. So those external partnerships, it's really about values alignment and identifying mutual benefit for the organizations that are partnering together.
I love that. I'm curious, question for everyone. As sustainability, product, and brand storytelling become increasingly intertwined, how can brands ensure their sustainability messages, experiences, and content resonate authentically and meaningfully with consumers? Huan, just given your role, I keep gravitating to you first. Would love to hear from you, and then Nadia, and then we can do it round robin.
Yes, no, 100%. And actually, it dovetails very nicely with what Jason was saying about trust, right? At the end of the day, our communication around this has to be genuine, and it's got to match the actions that we take as a brand, right? I think consumers are so aware of this at this point that we even have, the word greenwashing is very much a part of the vernacular now. We have a very enlightened customer. And so I think we are gone past the days when a brand could show up for Earth Day and, run an ad and seem to be very engaged on this topic, right? I think we are very, gladly, in my opinion, in a new age where customers will do the research and hold you accountable for that message, right? And so, I think that's a good thing. I think that we, all consider this in our communication is a very good thing. And I'm, thankful that we're in an age where consumers are so aware that they're challenging brands in this way, because that is really how you get sustainable change.
Absolutely. Just to build on that, I think, everything that Juan said, 100% agree with. I think what's sort of missing in terms of how we've been going about messaging on sustainability is, there's been so much, again, I think I alluded to this a bit earlier, we've had such a company first, message and story, where what people actually want to know is, what is it that you're offering? And, how does this relate to me? That's what they need to be able to discern immediately. Like, why should this matter to them? Why does it matter to the planet? Why does it matter to the community and people at large? And so I think that's where really, to land the messaging well, we need to be able to tell those stories in a more human-centered, people-centric way. And that's where, leveraging influencers or, people who are really able to distill that complex technical language and, make it easy to understand, easy to take in, that sort of stakeholder is really going to do the work to think through, like, okay, how can I tell the story in a way that people are going to just get it, right? Because they're always thinking about what's trending or, like what people care about. And so that's really what they're going to help you to do with telling your brand story. So I think that's like an area that as sustainability marketers, we need to think through more. How are we working with those key voices that not necessarily just Gen Z, but any folks who are sort of interacting with your brand online, those are the people that would be able to tell that story in a way that, resonates with what people actually care about, and also like people's, like the general public's understanding of sustainability, because folks don't know these really technical terms and jargon that we use within the organization.
So true. So true. Now, for our last question, I know we're practically out of time. What's one piece of advice you have for marketers, innovation executives, sustainability executives who are thinking more critically about purpose, performance, and partnership in 2026? Jason, do you want to get us started?
Sure, I'd come back to that theme of alignment, right? It's important to ensure that you have alignment between your purpose and your values as an organization, that you're performing against that, building strategies against that, and thinking about partnerships with that context of alignment.
Bill, what's your one piece of advice?
Yeah, back to values. Be clear on your values, and that brings the alignment Jason just mentioned, and stick to them, and that creates authenticity that people can detect with all of their senses.
Nadia, what's your one piece of advice?
I would say don't let perfection be the enemy of your progress. So as Bill and everyone has alluded to, this is work that needs to be done each day. So don't wait until 2030, right, to say, yay, we did it. Start talking about the work that you're doing now. Be authentic, be transparent, where you get to. Folks will respond well to that, and that will also help to grow, this movement further, right? To grow build buy-in internally, because we have more external sort of momentum and sharing on the topic.
But not least, fundamentals. Francine, what's your one piece of advice for everyone?
Yes, Fundamentals Francine wants you to stay culturally relevant and focus on telling the sustainable story in the language of your consumer. I'm so glad that influencers were mentioned toward the end there. One of our most viewed pieces of content is actually an influencer going into store to refill their perfume bottle. Consumers are interested, they care, but you've got to reach them and speak to them in their language.
Absolutely love all of these tips and ideas. I love this conversation. I started off by saying that we have this incredible brain trust here as a panel, and you guys really delivered. So thank you so much for that, and looking forward to just a wonderful 2026. Ellen, back to you.
Wow, that was a really deep conversation, and I just love that it is the final topic of 2025. It was just perfect. So thank you, Janelle, for pulling everyone together, Jason, Bill, Nadia, and Yuan. A recording to today's presentation will be emailed out in the next day or two. Also, yes, we've had some questions, and those will be responded to by email. So please be on the lookout for that. Have a most wonderful day, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Great.
Thank
Happy holidays.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Take care.
Hey.